If a tree falls in a forest and nobody is there to hear it, does it make a sound? This is a question that used to befuddle me when I was a child. You can't test the theory. If you're there to see it, then you're there and you're going to hear it, and it would make a sound. Sound waves come through the air and they vibrate on the eardrum. If there's no eardrum, there's no sound. Now, you have a person who's deaf. They could be in the forest and the tree would fall, they wouldn't hear it. So would it also not have made a sound? These are the kinds of things that defy logic and are the methods of thinking that very, very manipulative people can use to get people to doubt themselves and to believe things that aren't true. In my never ending use of Netflix and other streaming channels to calm myself down when I'm agitated or can't sleep, I just finished a limited series called No One Saw Us Leave. And it was based on a memoir by a young woman named Tamara Saltzman as a child, who was a Mexican Jew. He had a brother, Isaac, and parents, Leo and Valeria. It's set in the late 60s. What I like about how the series is put together is it starts in real time. It opens with the dad kidnapping his kids. And then the story is told through memories and flashbacks. And I love shows like that because you don't have to remember 5 episodes ago what happened when they were little. It goes back and forth all the time. The general gist of the story is that the marriage was arranged and encouraged and insisted upon. And when you look at the video of the wedding, neither one of them are too happy about it. There's 2 very powerful families. They're Jewish families in Mexico, and they're bankers. And the unification of these 2 families will make amazing things happen financially for these families. But you don't learn that until you've already watched the dad take the kids and tell them, oh, we're going on vacation. Yes, mommy loves you. Yes, she'll be along. And they cross the border into another town and to another country with fake passports that don't have their real name on them. And the dad has to shush them. All of these things that let you know that what's happening isn't right. But it's a dad and they're his kids. And so why can't he take them and travel indefinitely for as long as he wants? Well, then you meet the mother and she has no idea that the kids are gone and no one's answering her. And then you see the involvement of her father-in-law and his family, and now the 2 families wage. So it's 6 episodes. It's really well done. What I liked about it, it resonated with me. It struck a chord, and I've never been kidnapped, but I have been used as a pawn in the middle of fighting adults. I've been put in between things. As a child, between my parents, I often end up in between. I remember in college, we all wanted to go to Joni's wedding, and I agreed to stand up for us, and then nobody had my back. So now I was like stuck between people that I thought I was representing and people I was fighting to. And, I got shafted kind of. You get used as a pawn, just sort of played. It's common for people that don't have boundaries, which brings me to societal boundaries and what's often referred to now as the patriarchy, although that's a very manipulated term now. What exactly is a patriarch and what is a man and what is a woman and who does what and all of that. So we live in very murky times. The patriarchal thinking in this story, the father kidnaps the 2 children and disappears at the behest of his father because his wife has had an affair. Now, I know I'm going to give away a lot of this show, but it's all over. You can't look at the show and not find out what happens. The father-in-law, Leo's dad, sets up the kidnapping and provides the money and all of this. Leo is reluctant. He's not sure he wants to live on the run. He's not necessarily a willing participant, although he does follow orders. You think in the beginning, they talk about do you know what your mother's done? And she was in a mental hospital and all this kind of stuff. And basically, you find out that she's very, very unhappy in her marriage, never wanted to get married, desperately loves her kids, but isn't in love with Leo. Very, very sad. And she falls in love with her brother-in-law, and they begin a relationship and have an affair. And the affair so infuriates Mr. Saltzman, because it's his daughter's husband and his son's wife, that he facilitates the kidnapping. So you have the whole story of the kidnapping in the different countries. I won't go into all the details of the show. But when you look at the analysis of the show through AI and just in Google and all of that, you find out that really you have a double standard. Men in that time, men that were married because they were told to get married, always had mistresses. It was common nature. Men were expected to cheat, women were not. Having said that, a mother cheating on the father, right, is now a terrible mother and the children must be protected from her. Whereas a husband cheating on a wife, a father cheating on a mother, would be told to be more careful next time, to keep that stuff private. Like, wouldn't be told to stop, would be told to manage it better. You see that the treatment of Valeria is completely hypocritical, and she's unwilling to settle for it. She's unwilling to settle for it. Hence, she's portrayed as the one with the problem, the crazy woman, the unhinged mother. She's unsafe, that sort of thing. So what the father who kidnaps his kid is doing is something called vicarious violence and also second order violence. In these two forms of domestic abuse, gender specific abuse, male to woman to female at this time, domestic violence kind of thing, is used not so you're not directly abusing the person, you're using someone they love to abuse them. So he kidnapped her kids. They were his too, but he kidnapped them and wouldn't talk to her and wouldn't say where they were and wouldn't respond. Went on the run for 3 years to punish her. I'll show you who's boss. You should never have cheated on me. And his father actually ended up losing a lot of money and friends and social status by facilitating all this and being so publicly against his daughter-in-law, the cheating wife. So vicarious violence is using loved ones to hurt someone else. Kidnap the kids to punish their mother. It takes a step further where you have these, he's kidnapped the kids. Now, he says things like, your mother is no longer looking for you. She doesn't love you. And this is so utterly common in custody battles where you have one spouse verbally abusing and just demoralizing the other. And one spouse tends to get isolated. So Valeria had her lover who ended up divorcing his wife, and they were together until he died in the late 90s. He was a huge support, and Valeria had her family. Those were her parents' grandchildren as well. And so you had this whole political strife. And then second order violence is violence against the woman's environment, right? So a way to punish, to cause harm and suffering, to cause isolation. At the time these were put into law, and these are pieces of law that were developed in Mexico by the work of Tamara and in the process of writing her memoir and really analyzing and looking at gender inequities in violence and abuse in relationships and how the patriarchal beliefs that the man is in charge, that the man is superior, that men behave one way and women behave another, and the expectations are different. So as I'm saying all these things, those are also good things. Men and women aren't the same. They're very, very different. We tend to approach things differently. We have different mindsets. Our hormonal realities are different, which goes into how we think and process information. There are differences. And we shouldn't expect the same things from men and women. Sometimes equity isn't equality. Sometimes everyone getting a fair shake means some people get a little more than others. And again, this comes into all sorts of other things. I could go on about the far-reaching implications. Having said that, when it comes to morality and being judged on your actions, actions are actions. Cheating is cheating. It shouldn't be okay for the father to cheat, not for the mother. It should be okay for neither, right? But if you're going to say it's okay for one faction of society, you can't then say it's not okay for another. It was the feminist movement that demanded that all of these types of abuse be exposed for what they were, so that it would strengthen the protection of women and children. Now, think back to that term, women and children, historically speaking. Women and children are clumped together because they are, quote unquote, weaker and need more support and care. So there are women that would take offense to that. I don't need more support just because I'm a woman. Well, if you were a woman with an infant in your lap that you are feeding with your breasts, and you had a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and there was a disaster coming, you most certainly do need support and protection in a way that a man would not. If you had a family of people all together, then that whole family should receive protection as a unit. But in the day-to-day moments, one parent would have to be the one caring for the children while the other did other things. I feel that the patriarchal issue here is that we've assigned a value judgment that men are more important than women. Dads don't breastfeed their babies. They just don't. They don't, biological dads don't breastfeed their babies. And so women are now charged with being the primary care and life source for their children, for their babies, right? In these situations. And I'm thinking of family situations where there's trouble. I know, like in the Titanic, women and children go in first and then the men last. And so what are the thoughts there, that men are less important? Well, no, but women and children, fulfill society. And what self-respecting man would jump into a lifeboat when there was a mother with her baby, on the sinking ship? It's all of that social hierarchy and how we can go around and around and around, and somebody's always going to be insulted by it. And it happens all the time. I'm big into ageism now, and I don't like being diminished because I'm older pisses me off. But that doesn't mean that sometimes what's said to me isn't true. It doesn't mean that I would need modifications made for me in my day-to-day life due to my age. It doesn't make me less of a person. It just makes me an older person. So there's so much of that in here. The other piece of this type of abuse and situations like Valeria and Leo is that it was Valeria's job to be quiet and to deal with and just to live this life, do what was right, sit back and accept her unhappiness and all of that. Women are often told that it's their job to acquiesce to things. And especially in generations like really like the baby boomer generation, where they would have been baby boomers. They were in their early 20s in the late 60s. So they would have been born in the 40s, right? And yeah, so they would have just been the beginning of the baby boomer generation. And those kids were raised to have a nuclear family with a husband and a wife and kids, and everyone had specific roles. Sadly, I think the feminist movement sought to achieve gender equity by proving that women were as good as men, which basically acknowledged that men were better. I think had we just taken away the as good as and said parental roles are different in your family, decide who can do each parental role the best and live that way. I know lots and lots of stay-at-home dads whose wives have jobs and make much more money. And so they're the ones that stay home and care for the kids and the wives go to work. And, is it different? Yes. Should it be judged? No. You're loving your kids. The patriarchal system teaches women and children to normalize abusive behavior. So let's look at Tamara and Isaac, the two kids who were kidnapped. They obviously had no choice. They tried to get away a couple of times and of course were caught. They had no choice but to believe what their father said. Even when they knew he was lying and they challenged him, their job was to be quiet and behave. Then he brings them to a kibbutz. And in this particular kibbutz, parents are separated from the children. You're not there as family units. They call their parents by their first names. And they're learned to look at the community as a whole and that all the parents matter and value. Knowing how important maternal and paternal bonding is for kids, I find it horrifying. Now, that's my opinion, but that's also my opinion of what comprises a healthy family unit. So in Leo's kids were taught that their mother didn't love them, that she wasn't looking for them anymore, that he had not done anything wrong, that they were just traveling now. And then when they get to this kibbutz, they're taught that your parents are just those older people like everyone else's, and you stay with the kids and these caretakers who teach you a communal way of living, and you don't form close attachments to your parents. That made me a bit sad. This got me thinking, though, why is this show resonating with me so much? Well, I have a lot of issues around the definition of family, and I do feel that in terms of the thousands of years that we've been keeping history, that in general, families consisted of the parents of the children and the children. And you need to have a mom and a dad to make the babies. Obviously, parents die and kids are adopted and orphanages are created. There are always variations to things, but the natural order, you look at people who breed dogs, they get male dogs and female dogs and they make the puppies, right? Now, they don't stay together as families, but for general, promulgation of the species, you need to create children. So what is a family? So traditionally speaking, a family is a mom and a dad and kids. And I think sometimes there's this unwritten rule that it's that or nothing. And we live in a very, very flexible society now where family can take on new meanings. So there can be single parent families. There can be families with two moms, parents with two dads, parents where the kids are adopted, foster families. Like family takes on a multitude of roles, but in general, it's adults caring for children. And you have this familial unit where people work together and things come out right. Within a family unit, there has to be trust and respect. One person can't lord themselves over another. So I thought, okay, maybe this is why this series struck me, because I grew up being told to be quiet. And I know if you've listened to a lot of my episodes, I've said this a gazillion times. It was my job to silently endure abuse, dishonesty. And when the time came that I finally freed myself from the abuse and was ready to share my story, I was told that it was not my story to share, that I must be quiet to protect the family, to protect the father, to protect the patriarchy is how that feels for me. I think these very same things that happened to me have happened to children with their mothers. So it isn't just patriarchal. Perhaps it's also matriarchal. But you have somebody in a position of authority that can manipulate reality. So, okay, that makes sense. I looked at these kids as being forced into this situation that they had no control over, and they were told how to respond. So I'm like, okay, but where else in my life have I had this sort of vicarious violence. And I realized in my job loss, Chris Rath, the superintendent, when I was working, was like the abusive, manipulative parent. And she didn't like what I was doing. And so she wanted to punish me, of course. But the way she could, and she did, she said horrible things to me. But what she did was she went around and gathered people and forced them. This is actually more second order violence than vicarious abuse. Second order violence is when you go to people that you go to the environment of the person you want to hurt. You go to their job, you go to their friend circle or their family, and you create strife so that these people help you hurt the person or hurt the person directly themselves. I think to all of the people involved in the lies that were created when I lost my job. I was just in a job interview. I was on an interview panel. One of the women on the interview panel was the secretary that had been at Concord High at the time, who lied and made up stories about me coming in late all the time and that they were unexcused late and that I asked her to lie. None of that was true. None of it. I have the letter. Sometimes I'd like to just hand it to her and say, "So how do you feel about this now?" And she looks at me when I walk into a room and she looks at me. There's that moment of expression that flashes across the face where she's collecting herself. So I don't know if she feels bad about it or if she believed whatever was told to her. It's hard for me to say. But Chris Rath was masterful at vicarious violence and second order violence, where you get people to do what you want. Gene Connolly, who was the principal at the high school, admitted to a handful of people that shared with me that Chris Rath basically threatened him. It's your job or hers. You need to get her out. Do whatever it takes to get her out. And he did terrible things. He went around and got people to lie, and he himself treated me really badly. A lot of gaslighting and just bizarre. Tell me one thing and I would do what he said, and then he would punish me for doing what he said, saying he never said it, that kind of stuff. So I thought, okay, this is why I liked this series, because it reminds me of that. What really came to the surface for me was the feeling of powerlessness you get when other people are controlling your life, or you feel that they're controlling your life. They're, dishing out truth and then modifying the truth and changing the definitions of things so that you're not sure anymore at all of what's right or wrong or what's true or what isn't true. The other piece that comes to mind is all of the people that knew that Leo had kidnapped his kids that were unwilling to help Valeria. They had been roped into looking at her as this horrifying example of a mother, bad wife. And many of them had kids of their own, and they were perfectly willing to continue to help Leo and Leo's dad keep the kids away from their mother. Now, this lessened as time went along, as time does these things. And so I thought back to, in my life, people that knew what I was going through and didn't do anything to help me or say anything. And I don't have that so much in my family because I was admonished to keep everything secret. But I know in my job loss, people were convinced and they willingly helped. And as time has gone by, some of them have reached out and apologized, but many have not. I think they just hope it will just sort of dissipate and go away. So the final step that this took for me is family. I know that the father-in-laws, the grandfathers, Leo's dad and Valeria's dad, held on to an idea of family and what family meant. And you put family first and you had family loyalty. I mentioned earlier that I'm helping my friend David with exercise and strengthening. One of his children heard a rumor about something that I was accused of doing that I hadn't done. And she sent me an email, and it was a horrifyingly evil, mean, hurtful email, name calling and everything. It was devastating, like devastating. So we worked through it because I've known this girl since she was in high school. So we worked through it and sort of figured it out. And she apologized and I apologized for the parts of her accusations that were true and tried to clarify what was actually going on. And so her big thing was, I'm just loyal to my family. So family loyalty is important. My personal opinion in this case, because it so directly involved me, is that some of her loyalty was misguided and that you can practice being loyal without vilifying and hurting, just spewing evil at the person that you're upset with. There are a million ways to be loyal to your families. However, this sort of blanket loyalty was pervasive in this series. No one saw us leave. That got me to thinking about family. So I Google and ask, I ask Siri, what is family? And general definitions of family are a mom, a dad, and kids. Two parents and children. That's sort of the definition of a family. And then with all the multitude of things that can cause that familial unit to vary. One parent, a parent and a step parent, two parents, but they live in different places and back and forth, like all the things that can happen to disrupt the family unit. And then I got to reading about like current political ideologies and social ideologies that seek to disrupt or decimate the family, break up the family. So saying that a heteronormative family is judgy and narrow-minded, and that isn't the only kind of family. Well, of course that isn't the only kind of family, but you can have several different kinds of family without minimizing or disallowing the basic nature of what a family is. This was eye-opening to me because I felt like the mother in this series was not in love, wanted to end her marriage. The husband's like, until the children grow up, we must stay together. We must preserve the family, which to me is loyalty taken too far. No. You need a healthy family. And if it can't be healthy, then create a way that it can be healthy. So much of political ideology right now seeks to decimate the family unit. The kibbutz, it decimated the family unit. It recreated it completely. It took children away from parents, all the children over here, all the parents over here, and created a community nature. Now, maybe that was good for the kibbutz, but I would never want to raise a child in that environment because you take away all that maternal and paternal connection, which provides so much psychological safety to young children as they're growing up. I get looking at the whole gay marriage debate. 25, 30 years ago, when this first started, it was two-sided. It was a lot of like immoral. The religious people were all against it. And then you had the sociologists who were like, it will be confusing for kids and it upends the family. I know several people who've been raised in gay parent households that are fine, absolutely fine, because what they have is two loving, supportive parents that acknowledge the fact that they're different and that do not bemoan the reality of the friends and families of their friends. Then I went into like religion a little bit, and most every religious practice will look at the family unit as the foundation of a healthy society. Again, the traditional family unit would be mom, dad, kids, but what about chosen family? What if you come from a very abusive family and you choose to leave your family and live somewhere else and create a family of your own? We have a recreation of the word family, which also to me is a wonderful thing. I have friends that I consider family. I have friends that I consider family that suddenly were treating me like family in the negative way. And I realized, okay, maybe I don't want to be friends with these people. Do you see how complex this gets? At the end of the day, what I sort of come to believe in my own reality is that healthy families are important. Is my family healthy? I don't know. We have alcohol issues and dead children and and cheating and divorce and remarriage and financial issues and legal issues, like a million things that make us sometimes unstable. But we love one another. We're good to one another. Everyone has space to be who they are. So I feel that we are a good building block for a healthy society. So all of this, just because I watched a 6-episode series over the last couple of days that just got me thinking about what's going on. And when you look at what's going on in our world, boundaries, right? Creating boundaries. Okay, well, should countries have boundaries? And what does it mean to have healthy boundaries? And should we cross the boundaries? And, you have the ICE agents out there, many of them acting horribly, carting people off in horrible ways out of the country. And then you have protesters creating boundaries and saying, if you believe this, this, and this, you're not allowed in here. So, okay, how is that different than creating boundaries? If you do this and this, you're not allowed in here. Right? Everything is just so two-sided and troubling. Yeah, I think a nice big power grid mishap for like 2 weeks would be fantastic. Nothing could happen, right? Nobody would know all the evils going on. Maybe, I don't know. I'd panic. Where's my Gracie? No One Saw Us Leave. You should watch it. When you do, ponder your relationships with the people you love. Ponder what it means to be in love. Ponder what's okay for moms and dads to do. Because I certainly had moms and dads that thought they could do a lot of things they shouldn't. Ponder what family means to you. Did you grow up in a nuclear family? Did you grow up in a family that was maybe different? I do know when I look at my friends who are the most sort of healthy and settled and solid, a lot of them have some sort of traditional or spiritual training. And a lot of them come from nuclear families where their moms and dads lasted a long, stayed together a long time. Not all of them, please understand. But, am I preaching that is what we should strive for? No, not at all. One type of family isn't better than another. And that's where I think we make a mistake. We want to carve ourselves up and change who we are to fit a stereotype. How about we just stop using the stereotypes to judge ourselves and just practice love and all that kind of stuff. Netflix, they should sponsor my podcast because I send people there all the time. Not that they need any help. No One Saw Us Leave. Give it a watch or get the book. I think I'm going to order the book and read it because I certainly came away learning a lot. I did. So right now my family has grown. It grew by 2. My mother is here and Gracie came home for a bit. Now Gracie's gone again. She's in France. I live in a family that morphs and changes and flows with the tide of the water. Fill me in on your families. Let me know. Let me know how you grew up and how you think that affected you and what kind of family you've created in your adult life. Is it a chosen family? Have you stopped speaking to people in your family? It's just interesting. It's interesting. It was a good watch. You should watch it. So be good to yourself and then be good to everyone in your family. And as always, have a good day, everybody. Hey, thanks for listening and supporting the podcast. Feel free to leave a review and share my stories with your friends. Please reach out with your own stories, as I love connecting with my listeners. If you would like to get to know Molly, head over to mollybfoundation.org to see what she is all about. If you want to see what I'm up to next, you can find me on Instagram at Barb_444, on Facebook as Barb Higgins, and at my website, 1000tinysteps.com. And while you're there, sign up for my newsletter, a weekly way to find out what's up in the life of Barb Higgins.